Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear may sound impossible. After more than a year of very tough taxes on goods crossing the border, daily threats from the White House, and President Donald Trump openly making fun of the idea of Canada as its own country, calling it the 51st state of America, the numbers are finally here. And those numbers are not just surprising, they are honestly embarrassing for the man sitting in the Oval Office. Canada is not falling apart. Canada is not begging for help. Canada is growing. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how Mark Carney quietly changed what was supposed to be an economic disaster into an economic wake-up call, and why officials inside Trump's own administration are starting to wonder if the tax on goods plan has just exploded in their faces. Let me take you back. Just 1 year ago, when Donald Trump returned to the White House, the common thinking in Washington was very simple. Canada sends about 3/4 of its goods for sale to the United States. Hit them hard enough with these taxes on goods, and they will give in. They will come crawling back. They will sign whatever deal Trump puts in front of them. Senior advisors told reporters that Canada would be in a recession by the middle of 2025. Auto sector unions in Windsor said the job losses would be terrible. The Bank of Canada itself warned that growth would be permanently slowed down. And Trump, in his usual style, kept pushing harder. 25% taxes on cars, 50% on steel, new limits on aluminum. He even told Carney directly, in a now famous line that spread across Ottawa, that Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark? Those were his words. Cold, public, designed to embarrass. Fast forward to last week. The scene shifts to Ottawa, where Canadian Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne walks into a press conference with a document that, in any other year, would have been normal. A spring economic update, a mini budget, the kind of thing political reporters usually get bored with. But this one was different. This one was a quiet big change. Champagne announced that Canada's deficit for the current fiscal year is now expected to be $67 billion Canadian dollars. That is $11 billion Canadian dollars, lower than what was expected just 5 months earlier in the November budget. $11 billion better than expected in the middle of a trade war with your largest trading partner, putting taxes on your most important industries. And Champagne, looking calm, looking almost amused, told reporters, the world has been more uncertain than ever. But despite that, the Canadian economy has been strong and able to recover. We are definitely entering a new world order. Read those words again. We are entering a new world order. That is not the language of a beaten country. That is the language of a country that sees opportunity. Now, you might be thinking, all right, smaller deficit, that is one number. Show me the growth, fine, here it is. The government's spring update expects that the Canadian economy will grow by about 2% this year. 2%. Compare that to the panic expectations from a year ago when economists were openly using the word recession. Last year, growth came in at roughly 1.7%. This year is on track to be even better. Here's the important part. According to Paul Beaudry, a professor at the Vancouver School of Economics who appeared on National Public Radio, over the weekend, Canada is now sitting in second place among the 7 largest advanced economies in the world. Second fastest growth in the entire G7. Let that sink in for a moment. The country that Donald Trump said would not survive without American help is currently growing faster than Germany, France, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom. The only G7 nation growing faster is the United States itself. And even there, economists are warning that American growth is what they call K-shaped, meaning the wealthy are doing fine, the stock market is climbing, but young people, working families, and small businesses are getting crushed by rising prices, by housing costs, and yes, by the taxes on goods Trump claimed would bring prosperity home. So, how did Carney do this? Because, make no mistake, this did not happen by accident. The taxes on goods are real. The pain in Windsor and Hamilton and Saguenay is real. Auto job losses have happened. Steel mills are hurting. The Vancouver Economist made that clear, saying that young Canadians are struggling, jobs are harder to find, and the picture is not all sunshine. But the big economic story, the overall picture, is one of survival turning into a smart plan, and the plan has 3 main parts. First, oil and natural resources. Second, careful money management that sounds boring but matters a lot. And third, And this is the one Trump should be losing sleep over, spreading out trade to other countries. Let us take them one at a time. On energy, Canada got a helpful push nobody fully expected. Global oil prices went up in recent months, partly because of tensions in the Middle East and the ongoing effects from conflicts involving Iran. For most countries, higher oil prices are bad news. They drive up gas at the pump. They squeeze consumers. They feed rising prices. And yes, Canadian drivers and airlines are feeling that squeeze. But Canada is also the fourth largest oil producer on Earth. So when prices rise, Canadian energy companies make billions more in revenue. The federal government collects more in company taxes, more in personal income taxes from energy workers, and more royalties. The Globe and Mail reported that the spring update revised income tax expectations upward by $8.6 billion per year on average over the next 5 years. That is real money, money that is filling the gap left by the damage from taxes on goods. In effect, political chaos halfway around the world is paying Carney's bills while Trump squeezes Canada from the south. The second part is what Champagne called careful money management. The deficit, even with new spending, is $67 billion. The government is now expecting that deficit will continue to fall by an average of more than $10 billion Canadian dollars per year through the end of the decade. Compare that with the money path in the United States, where the federal deficit has grown past $2 trillion American dollars every year, and where credit rating agencies have been openly warning about the long-term ability to pay American debt. Champagne stood at that podium and said, "By spending less, we can invest more in the things that really matter to Canadians." He kept repeating one phrase. Canada's deficit, he said, remains low compared to other industrialized nations. Translation, we are the responsible adults in the room, and the United States is the one running up the credit card. Now, the third part. This is the one that turns this story from a domestic budget update into a big geopolitical surprise, spreading out trade to other countries. Mark Carney, the former central banker of both Canada and England, the former chairman of Bloomberg, has not just been surviving Trump's taxes on goods. He has been quietly moving the Canadian economy away from depending so much on America. Just last week, in a speech in Ottawa, Carney announced something that Canadian leaders have been talking about for 40 years, but never had the courage to do. He launched the Canada Strong Fund, Canada's first national sovereign wealth fund, $25 billion Canadian dollars in initial money, with plans to grow it through asset recycling, private investment, and returns. Carney described it not as a government fund, but as a people's fund, a national savings and investment account designed to grow wealth for future generations. The money will flow into critical minerals, into liquefied natural gas, into transport infrastructure, into data centers, into the kind of important projects that make a country less dependent on any single trading partner. And then came the line that should have set off alarms inside the White House. Carney said, Canada is on track to double its non-United States exports within a decade. He talked about $300 billion in new orders for Canadian resources, goods, and expertise. $300 billion. Already non-American exports are up roughly 17% year over year. That is not a small change. That is a big structural shift. Canada is signing energy deals with Asia. Canada is deepening trade ties with the European Union. Canada is talking with the United Kingdom, with South Korea, with Japan, with Germany. New crude oil pipelines are being approved. The Trans Mountain Network is being expanded. A massive net zero liquefied natural gas facility is being built in British Columbia. The whole point is to break what Carney's energy minister called the North American trade lock, the idea that Canadian oil and gas can only flow south. Once those pipelines and ports are working, Canadian energy can sail to Tokyo, to Rotterdam, to Mumbai, and Trump's power shrinks year by year, ship by ship. This is where the political side gets very interesting. Donald Trump's entire way of negotiating is based on power, on pain, on the assumption that the other side has no choice. He used it on Mexico. He used it on the European Union. He used it on China. And in the short term, it hurts. Nobody is denying that. Economists at the Fulcrum estimate that the tax on goods cycle has already cut between 1.5% and 2% off Canadian gross domestic product. Canadian households are absorbing somewhere between $1,100 and $2,000 in higher annual costs because of these taxes on goods. The auto industry is losing money. General Motors itself is telling investors that it expects $3 to $4 billion in tax on goods costs in its 2026 forecast. So, yes, the pain is real, but here's the thing about power. It only works if the other side has nowhere else to go, and Carney is making sure Canada has somewhere else to go. Meanwhile, in the United States, the Supreme Court delivered another blow back in February of this year. The court ruled that the legal basis for most of Trump's 2025 tax on goods increases under the International Economic Emergency Powers Act was invalid. Read that again. The Supreme Court of the United States struck down the very legal foundation Trump used to launch the trade war. The ruling did not end the taxes on goods immediately because the administration quickly tried to find other legal reasons, but it took away the moral and constitutional confidence behind the entire plan. Combine that with the fact that Canadian growth is speeding up, with the fact that European leaders are quietly welcoming Carney, with the fact that American consumers are paying higher prices because of these very taxes on goods. And the picture starts to look very different from the one Trump sells at his rallies. So, what is Trump's situation right now? Politically, he is still loud, still confident on television, still telling crowds that the taxes on goods are working, that money is flooding into the United States Treasury, that Canada will eventually beg for relief. But behind the scenes, the data tells a different story. American manufacturers are warning about cost increases. The Federal Reserve is struggling with sticky rising prices that many economists trace directly to the taxes on goods. United States Treasury yields have been jumping around as bond markets question the long-term money path of the country. And on the international stage, allies are losing patience. The European Union has sped up its own trade deals with countries that used to be in America's orbit. Mexico, even after taking its own beating from Trump, has been quietly cutting deals with Brazil, with Argentina, with the European Union. The world is not waiting. The world is moving on. And then there is the political cost inside Canada. Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, has tried to attack Carney by calling the new sovereign wealth fund a sovereign debt fund. He has hammered the government on spending, but polls reportedly show that Canadians are still coming together around Carney's bigger plan. Why? Because Canadians have watched day after day as a foreign president called their country a fake nation, demanded they become an American state, and slap taxes on goods that hurt their factories. And the man who responded, the man who refused to flinch, who refused to beg, who refused to fly to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring, was Mark Carney. There is a saying in politics, nothing unites a country like a foreign enemy, and right now, Donald Trump is the most effective Canadian nation builder in living memory, completely by accident. Let us also widen the lens. What does this story mean for the rest of the world? It means that the assumption that the United States can bully its closest allies into giving in is being tested in real time, and the test is not going well. If Canada, the country with the deepest economic ties with the United States, the country sharing the longest undefended border in the world, can take taxes on goods and come out growing faster than 5 other G7 nations, what does that tell Berlin? What does that tell Tokyo? What does that tell Brussels? It tells them that pain is survivable, that spreading out trade is possible, that the American consumer market, while huge, is not the only game in town. And once those capitals start believing that, the entire structure of American economic power starts to shake. There is also a historical parallel here that is hard to miss. Back in the 1970s, when global oil markets were in trouble, several countries decided they could no longer depend on a single power for their economic safety. Norway built its sovereign wealth fund. The Gulf states built theirs. Singapore built theirs. Decades later, those countries are economic fortresses, sitting on trillions of dollars, safe from the kind of pressure that crushes weaker economies. Canada has stayed on the sidelines of that trend for 50 years, until now, until Trump. The Canada Strong Fund is being built in direct response to Trump's taxes on goods. And once it exists, no future American president will be able to threaten Canada the same way again. It is permanent, it is structural, and it is a direct gift, ironically, of Trump's own behavior. So, who is winning really? In the very short term, both sides are hurting. Taxes on goods hurt everybody. Auto workers in Detroit feel it. Auto workers in Windsor feel it. Farmers feel it. Consumers feel it. But in the medium and long term, the country that is rewiring its economy, building new partnerships, launching a sovereign wealth fund, attracting record investment, and growing faster than its rivals, is not the country imposing the taxes on goods. It is the country absorbing them and changing direction. Canada is making a multi-decade plan. Trump is making a daily news cycle plan, and those time horizons matter. They decide who is left standing when the dust settles. Now, I want to bring this home with one final thought. The most dangerous moment for any superpower is the moment its threats stop working, when fear stops producing obedience, when allies start protecting themselves, when the smaller players in the system look at the rules and decide they can write new ones. The United States has been the dominant economic force on Earth since the Second World War. And a huge part of that power has been the simple belief, shared in capitals all over the world, that getting on America's bad side is suicide. Donald Trump has spent his second term testing that belief to the limit, and Canada, the country he insulted the most, the country he put taxes on the hardest, the country he dismissed as the 51st state, just told the world that you can take everything Trump throws at you and still grow faster than most of the planet. That is the headline. That is the story. That is what those numbers from Ottawa really mean. Not just a smaller deficit, not just 2% growth, but a quiet, clear signal to every government on Earth that the era of unquestioned American economic dominance is being challenged, and the challenger is sitting right next door. So, now I want to hear from you. Do you think Mark Carney has actually outsmarted Donald Trump on the global stage? Do you believe Canada's growth is sustainable? Or is this the calm before a deeper storm? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this analysis gave you something new to think about, if it helped you see what most cable news has been missing, hit that like button so the algorithm shows it to more people who deserve the truth. And if you have not already, subscribe and ring the bell, because the next chapter of this Trump versus Carney standoff is going to be even bigger, and you do not want to miss it. Until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and keep watching the borders, because this story is just getting started.